Kokina semdol kake mofaseda.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Talking in Stations, the news show about EVE Online. I am Matterall, the news chief at TMC, TheMittanidotcom. And today we have the usual panel and Rhivre, who's a guest we haven't seen in a while. She's run the show at one time, actually. But let's meet everybody and say hello to Tiberius first.
Hey, Tiberius StarGazer, member of Northern Coalition, Dice Corporation, and editor-in-chief for EVE NT, and the senior editor for EVE News 24.
Excellent. Ashterothi.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashterothi, and I actually just launched a new podcast. So I am the host of On Grid Podcast, as well as commander of Aderon Robotics and member of High Drag Podcast in this one.
Yeah, excellent. Dirk. Welcome.
Hey, what's up? It's Dirk MacGirk from the Open Com Show. Also a member of SNIG in Pandemic Legion.
Awesome. And as I said before, we have Rhivre now, who I'll introduce in just a second. But later in the show, in just about 15 minutes, we're going to have the FC from Goon Swarm, Asher Elias. Riv, how have you been doing?
Yeah, not bad. Hi, I'm Rhivre. I'm a station trader and writer for TMC.
Yeah, and we're going to discuss an article that she just put up, and we'll get into a lot of news after. Asher, why don't you tell us about your podcast first? I want to hear about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but the podcast is called On Grid Podcast. I teamed up with Elise Randolph and Mike Azariah. So I wanted to get a broad amount of knowledge within the limited people that we have. So we have a really big nullsec person, really big highsec person, and myself with lowsec experience. And basically, instead of just talking about whatever the news is, the goal of the show is to pick one thing that's kind of important of what's going on and super focus on it until it's exhausted. So that way to kind of put the game into perspective in different ways. So our first episode is out and its focus is on fleet boosts because it's a big deal for me. And of course, the 07 show just announced the changes to fleet boosts. So it just got posted on Crossing Zebras. Thankfully they're hosting it for me because I don't have the resources to get my own website hosting at the moment. So they're hosting it for me. But
are you a homeless podcaster?
No, I'm not a homeless podcaster, but you know, I've got a 3-year-old, man. I got priorities.
Hey, Dirk, you're back from vacation, right? I took a few weeks off too.
Yeah, man.
Where'd you go?
I was down the shore for a week, down the Jersey Shore, just sunning on the beach.
Any mafiosos there?
No, this is South Jersey, so it's more kind of the Philadelphia coast, as we call it. Yeah.
You're not.
No, it's not that North Jersey, MTV Jersey Shore type stuff.
You're not connected, are you?
No.
Because I won't
Dirk's
cross
a
you.
made man.
If you are. Yeah. Tiberius, thanks for taking a disco nap and joining us. Really appreciate you coming in as late as you are. It must be like 1 a.m. over.
2:10
Yikes.
in the morning.
Yikes. And Rhivre is even worse because she's in Netherlands, I believe.
No, Denmark, but yeah, it's 3:10 here.
Oh, I'm sorry. You all look the same, you Europeans.
Wow.
You're all pretty. I'm just kidding. All right, let's get on with the show. The first thing we're going to discuss is an article that's being written about something that's going on in HiSec around Jita. And Rhivre's going to walk us through what's going on there and why it's important. And then we'll talk about it after that. Thanks. Go ahead.
So, there's, as people know, there's the HiSec Fortizars, which are around Jita in Perimeter and New Caldari and places like that. And they've been up and running for a couple of months now with the 0% broker fees for people to do offshoring. So basically buy stuff in Jita while avoiding all the taxes. And this was all running along nicely until 2 weeks ago or so. One of the ones in Perimeter 5 got war decked by Mercenary Coalition. And there was the Corp put up a notice on their Corp description that they'd been told that they'd been decked by Mercenary Coalition being hired by Lenny Kravitz too. And so he was going to take down all the Fortizars, and they needed defenders. That Fortizar actually came down. It was destroyed on the 14th, I believe. And the owners of the Fortizar put up a second Fortizar so their traders could go somewhere else. And that was through a second corp. And that second corp got decked as well. And there's a war ongoing there. And then in the last 2 days or so, other Fortizars in New Caldari and Perimeter have started to be decked by not just Mercenary Coalition, but Vendetta as well. And the rumors had been that it was Lenny Kravitz doing it. And then on Reddit last week, he came up and spoke a lot on one of the threads about it and said that, yeah, it was basically him doing it. And he wanted to take down all the Fortizars to disperse trade more fairly throughout EVE. And that was what was behind it. He wanted to set up places for Test and Darkness and Pandemic Horde to be able to do logistics easier to get their items into HiSec or to a trade hub much easier than having to go into Jita. And that left a lot of people asking questions about why he was taking down the HiSec Fortizars in order to do this. So I sent him some questions during the last day or so, which he's replied to, and we've published the answers to that on TMC earlier this evening, and Matterall's probably got a link to it somewhere.
Yeah, you can actually go to TheMittanidotcom, and well, it's easy enough. TheMittanidotcom, and it's the first article there. Citadels, dispersing the market hubs.
One other thing I would add as well that was actually quite interesting, the HiSec Fortizars all had contracts with the HiSec mercs like Vendetta, Archetype, etc. And when the first Fortizar got decked by Mercenary Coalition, the mercs refunded the fees and cancelled the contract. So basically leaving the Fortizar with no one to defend it. And this has been a trend that's happening.
This is another one of those situations where it's like if one merc group, takes it, the other ones don't want to fight against them or whatever it is.
I don't think it's related to the blue donut of mercs, because there have been other mercs decking stuff in HiSec, and the ones that are on retainer have been turning up to defend it. So it's just these Fortizars in Jita that, as soon as Mercenary Coalition decked them, they refunded the owner and said, we can't protect you.
Well, is that fear of Mercenary Coalition, or is that just Lenny Kravitz going to them as well and going, hey, by the way, how much do they pay you? Okay, I'm paying you double. Pay them back.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily, it could be a fear of Mercenary Coalition, but I know that Vendetta and Archetype are more than capable of sending up enough ships to take on a Mercenary Coalition fleet that's been turning up. So I don't know what the actual reason behind it is. It could well be that Lenny has paid them off, but I don't know that for sure. So it would be just pure speculation on my part.
Well, wasn't there something a few weeks ago? I mean, shortly after really Citadels came out and started to sprout up down there, that somebody wanted to hire the mercs for defense, but because of who was attacking them, they wouldn't, they got no takers.
That was the first citadel that went up the Ashterothi in Perimeter, and the reason that actually came down was it was that they have a blue donut thing, and so because Vendetta decked the corp that owned it, the other ones wouldn't join in against it, and they wouldn't defend, and they were also more interested in getting the first kill in HiSec on a Fortizar. But once the other ones came out, they pretty much, it wasn't just one Merc Corp they had on retainer, it was all of the HiSec Merc Corps. So, I'm sure between them they could have put together a fleet to take on Mercenary Coalition.
Yeah, I think that's a good untold story, and that is the donut of mercs that won't attack each other in HiSec.
And Tom's saying in chat that, they had 60 rattlesnakes and 30 logistics, and Vendetta alone can't take on that. But when you've got Vendetta and Archetype and all the other ones up in high sec, then I think they can, or at least, have a good fight and stop you taking down the Fortizar so fast.
Right, because there's also the Fortizar to contend, which admittedly is weaker against subcaps, but it's still
it's got no cool toys in high sec. It's got none of the fun AoE stuff.
How do you predict? Sorry, how do you predict this playing out? Like, what do you think's going to happen?
Well, at the moment, Lenny is saying that his idea is, he just wants to spread people out from high sec. That's all he wants to say. But that's all he wants to do. But then it's, do people believe that that's what he wants to do? That in order to redistribute traders in high sec, he's destroying the high sec Fortizars in Jita. And then he said in some of the answers that he's doing today that he will call off the attacks if somebody sets up one of these trade hubs in the outer hub areas that he has in mind. So it seems to me that it's a bit more of extortion than anything else.
Well, and this appears to be a second act for him, right? Because he was one of the financiers, of Brave a long time ago when they were being attacked by PL, and later he moved to be one of the financiers to kind of do this invasion in the north, as known as World War B. And so I guess there's still some involvement in the remnants of that war, in that he's paying tests to go down and harass goons as they try to take over Sov, or basically bolster the resistance down there. This seems to be like a different path for him. I wonder if his motivations are tied together, or is he really just looking for places where he can improve the game? Because I think that's what he puts out publicly.
What, all of a sudden he's a mastermind now?
I just wonder if the motivations
and sorry,
are...
I think Ashterothi said that before the show, so I would like to quote Ashterothi, but second it.
There you go. Well, I got even one better, which is, here's my tinfoil, because yes, Rhivre, you're not supposed to speculate. That's what my job is. So what if he's doing it because the last major thing that the goons tried to do before all of this stuff was take over a bunch of area in high sec? This is kind of the holy grail of kind of exerting your force on the universe, and he's going for it.
Yeah, I mean, I could go for that, and it just seems to me that he hasn't actually been clear between the interview that he did for us and between the Neocom and between Reddit. He's changing what he says. It doesn't seem to be consistent. And for example, in the article today, he says that outside of the 4 main trade hubs, there's no mini hubs that everyone has access to, and that's not true. In HiSec, there's mini hubs in Stackmon, in Orvola, in Ursulut, and then there's hubs down in Lowsec, where the faction war places are. So there are plenty of places that you can go and sell your stuff, and there are people who make their entire living in EVE from taking stuff out of Jita and selling it at mini hubs at a markup.
I mean, what I will say is this, because I think that you can go through almost every one of his answers and just chip apart at the whole thing, right? I think that what you have in EVE is a wonderfully working free market system. Okay, and he is trying to, when you look at what he's talking about in terms of, well, years down the road, NPC stations might be gone in HiSec. They're not going to be gone in HiSec. I don't actually believe that. But you know what? These things change when there is a need to change. There is literally not a need for what he's talking about out there. If there was, the people who are responsible for making markets, who do this every single day and have been doing it for years, would do it because it would make market sense.
I find it interesting that you say that you don't believe that, because I don't think that he believes it either, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he may not. I mean, maybe he does, and then that would just make him even wronger than what I think he is. But
well,
I mean,
he's got
I
too
would
much
rather
time
just
in
hear
this
that
game.
he wants to blow these things up, and and I don't know, just blow them up. That would make at least sense.
I'm sure the marketers are kind of like, who's this outsider telling us how to do our business, telling us where to go. I think Rhivre might have mentioned that, but it seems to me that would be kind of offensive if I've worked really hard on this side of the game, and this guy with, Richie Rich.
Casino funded central planning. He's like pulling a Donald Trump here. I know how to, the market.
I can run the country. It's no problem.
And that's what kind of gets me the most about this. Like when he was funding World War B, whatever, there was a clear delineation of reason as to why he was doing what he was doing. And so you could get behind it. I wouldn't necessarily say he was being altruistic, and I wouldn't necessarily say that I trusted him, but I knew where his motivations were, and therefore I knew what to expect out of him. But with this, like what he's saying doesn't match the motivations, and more importantly, it doesn't match the understanding of the game that I'm sure that he must have. And so it causes me to wonder what is going on, because here's the thing, he's still an EVE player. Like everybody is acting like trusting him is an option. Like, oh yeah, we should just believe him because he said it. Like if that was anyone else besides Kriba, like just because Kriba gets brought up in conversations with him a lot, doesn't mean that he should be any more trustworthy than anyone else.
I really like
I have a point.
Oh, Asher's here. Hold on, let me introduce you.
you
This
go.
is Asher Elias, who's FC for Goonswarm, and he's joining us for the rest of the program. He was doing a fleet earlier. He's here now. Thanks. Go ahead, Asher.
Hey.
What do you got?
I heard you guys talking about the Lenny Kravitz high-sec citadels, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So Ashterothi was saying it doesn't have he saw the reason for doing it in like nullsec, the World War B casino or whatever you want to call it. But it was the same thing. He saw a system that he thought was broken. He said nullsec is broken, and I have the ability to fix it. And then he's doing the same thing. He says, the market is broken, and I have a better way to fix it, and I can use these resources that I have to do so. So I think it's the exact same motivation, whether you agree with it or not. That is definitely his. He sees himself as a force that's intervening to fix a broken system in both cases.
Yeah, and I think he surrounds himself with people who have been... The legitimacy of knowing what's broken and how to fix it and all that comes not from him, but from people he surrounds himself with. The thing is, that's a very partisan thing to do, because what's broken for them is not necessarily broken for the people who are going to have to adjust to the new reality.
That's correct. I want to respond to what Ash said, if that's okay.
And then Rhivre, because Rivre's got to go to bed.
Yeah, absolutely. So you bring up a really good point, and the thing is that to be totally honest, I had no idea who he was prior to World War B. Like when he came up as being the financier of World War B, that's when he first came across my radar. So I'm a low secker, whatever. So I might not have seen all that motivation. I could see that clear delineation of like what happened with Space Monkeys Alliance, and I could see that and I could buy it. But this new event almost exposes that other half of the narrative for me, if that makes sense. And I don't think that I am alone in being in that perspective, because if you're not like a high up in nullsec politics, which a lot of people that play EVE aren't, Lenny Kravitz was basically only the guy who started World War B.
Yeah, I agree with Asher that, there is a problem with the markets, and people have said for years that, EVE could do with more mini hubs. And there are Fortizars throughout HighSec in various locations, and then down in NullSec, Pandemic Horde have got their Keep Star, and Darkness have got a Keep Star. So these places are here. So for me, the thing is, if you want to create, as he says, a network so that the null guys and whoever can get easy access to the markets, just do it. Just drop whichever size citadel you want down in whichever location. And if you've got the contacts and you can persuade people to come to your citadel, then do it. It's, the logic of then basically trying to extort the high-sec Fortizar owners around Jita, which is like 4 guys who are mostly in one-man corps who have like no interest in moving anywhere else, to say that, if I do this, then I'll be able to build these citadels down there and make, everyone will come and use them because I'm going to use my contacts to make sure it happens. The two things for me don't match together at all. And there is definitely need for more mini hubs in EVE, and there's more need for more activity outside of the main hubs. And I've worked quite a lot of my EVE trading career down in, back end of nowhere places, trying to get industry hubs to start having a market, or trying to get miners to come into my stations. So yeah, there is definitely a need for it, but it's the disconnect between where he wants to put them and who he's trying to get to go into business with him, because he does say that, he would, if these guys won't do it, he will have to do it himself, which, is why not just do it yourself in the first place?
It seems to be a bit of a
because he doesn't want to be bothered. I mean, he's a banker for a casino. He doesn't want to be bothered with what it takes to do that kind of stuff. So what he wants to do is he wants to create something. He either wants other people to go do it, if that is true that he even wants that, but or he's going, when he says do it yourself, it's not going to be him doing this, right? He's going to hire minions with his money. The one thing I will say is that I don't want to discourage his use of capital in order to generate content. So hiring of mercs to do whatever or anything like that. Whatever the reason is behind it, how fail we think that reason is, or what we think the ultimate outcome is going to be, is a completely different discussion. But
I mean, I'm also uncomfortable with the invoking of Rhivre that he does in the article, because I asked
me
him
too. Rhivre and charities, to me, it makes me cringe a little bit. The charity thing I get, because honestly, if you can do something for kids who are ailing, like, you've done something. If you can do nothing else, you've done something.
Whatever happened to that?
Before you take it into a totally different direction.
No, I wasn't. I was going to ask about that other charity thing that was announced a while back. Did that ever come of anything? But keep going. Sorry.
All right, we'll bring it back to that. But also, Rhivre being used as an armor of legitimacy, because everybody lacks it in this game where it's all or nothing as far as trust. It's a very interesting thing that's kind of a side note to all this. But Rhivre, why don't you go ahead and say any last thoughts you have, and then if you want to answer Dirk's question, that's great too.
Yeah, I mean, it was the invoking of Rhivre was quite strange, because the question I asked was, if someone wants to build a hub in a location that you haven't designated as a hub, but it's a remote region, will you support them, and will you use your contacts to get people to come to them? And he said yes, if they agree to certain conditions, and one of those conditions is having to have Rhivre involved as a CEO or as some part of the corporation, in order to make sure that the market stays open for everyone forever. And it just seems that, Rhivre's getting dragged into everything at the moment.
I think actually over time, if this happens enough, people will be like, fuck Rhivre. Like, he'll actually tarnish. He may not be agreeing to this stuff, but just because his name gets floated all the time, he's seen like a political tool, and people aim at tools.
Well, if he accepts the responsibility, I mean, that's just another one of his, let's call it, third party,
Yeah, but
deals.
Just floating his name without his accepting at all, or just using him as a, hey, I have legitimacy. I can't get CCP to legitimize me as a neutral party, but I'll get Rhivre to do it for me. By the way,
what do you mean about Rhivre being a tool? Can you clarify that?
Yeah, he's not I don't mean that in a derogatory way.
Oh yeah,
you called Rhivre
being used.
No, I didn't know. Matterall did not call Rhivre a tool. No, it didn't happen. But if he's used as an instrument.
Yeah, let me just get the quote.
And while you do that, actually, I want to talk about Rhivre, because some people may not know who he is, and he started out. Does anybody have a good background in Rhivre? If not, I'll do it. Tiberius?
You're
at the front of the class.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, I've met Rhivre a couple of occasions, and I kind of agree with a lot of the sentiment here that he's, because the Rhivre I've met is so. First of all, he's really proud of the fact that he maintains this massive neutrality. It is basically what his entire EVE career is based on. And he's so willing to protect that neutrality that he wouldn't even let me buy him a beer when I met him in London.
That's a good end.
So,
all right,
but
it seems like you guys want Rhivre. You're viewing this as Rhivre's endorsement rather than simply him just verifying that what is said is true, which is all Rhivre does.
I mean, the thing is that there were 2 times Rhivre was mentioned in the article. One, I said, you've said that if someone builds fortizars in the outer areas of EVE, you'll stop your attacks. So is this aimed at the current fortizar owners, or is it aimed at anyone who wants to build a remote region hub? And the reply was, it is aimed at anyone who wishes to do so. The current fortizar owners are in the best position to do so, but they do not seem keen on that idea. I've also stated that if this does not gain traction, I will set it up myself and do it in a way that it will be managed and controlled by others and overseen by Rhivre, so there is complete trust in the operation. And then he also invokes it later as well in response to the question about whether people can set it up in other hub locations. He says, if it, let me just see if I can find it. I've just scrolled up the page. I asked, if someone wishes to build a remote region hub, will you give your assistance to them for stocking and providing customers? And he said, if they show me that it is a viable business and has a solid plan to succeed, I will help them. There would be conditions, though, like having Rhivre maintain control and oversight. This is to make sure the clients and the traders are protected.
Yeah.
Right. So I can go into a brief history of Rhivre if you want.
Real quick.
Yeah, okay, so Rhivre is this guy who's been around in EVE for basically ever. And if you think of EVE as obtuse now, before it was not even nearly an eighth this good. And so there's a lot of different external tools that needed to be built in order to make things functional. And so Rhivre was one of the very early people that built tools for the community. And a lot of his tools are still used today, like EVE Offline and whatnot. And then on top of that, he just kind of became this really cool guy in game and was in a sea of everyone backstabbing. He always kind of made a name for himself for being the EVE's good guy. He's done a bunch of kind of spectacles to that. He's gotten the word Veldspar tattooed on his arm. He was one of the first people to get like an EVE tattoo publicly.
He publicly dated Mintchip, LOL.
Yeah, that was. I'm going to skip over that part.
I guess wisely.
He's one of the people that's really well known for having the Veld fleet. So he had carrier or dreadnoughts that he built in high-sec back when that was possible. But he only ever mined Veldspar on it because he was a pacifist or whatever. And he's still allowed to keep them. So he's got all these different things. He owned a system in nullsec for a little while that was an open trade hub. Either way, and the big thing that made him a lot of fame and power was he started Rhivre's third-party services. When you trade Titans, there's no really good way to trade a Titan, at least prior to Citadels, because when two people show up, one person has money, the other person has Titan. I give you the money, now one person has the money and the Titan, or the other guy gives the person the Titan, and then one person has the money and the Titan, and EVE is bad, and therefore that arrangement is bad. And so what Rhivre did was he put his trust on the line and said that if you give me the money, I will broker the deal, as it were. And he made a very strong reputation, and a lot of ISK doing this. Other people, including the Mittani, use this as a way to scam people, but he always stayed true. And so his name has become kind of synonymous with that key that guarantees trust. And so that's why you're seeing this happen now. It's not saying that Rhivre is going to, be the guy who's fiddling with everything. But what the problem is that like EVE systems are not designed to protect you. They're designed to give you as much freedom, and so people can break other people's trust. And there are key positions in this game that you just simply cannot secure. Yeah. And so they're saying that if we give those key positions to Rhivre, then we know that the key holder will not screw it over, and that's the goal.
That's great, by the way. Good job.
I feel like we're making kind of more words over nothing. I mean, this is really kind of nothing other than Fortizars or other than citadels being attacked down there for whatever reason. The mere fact of the matter is that these trade hubs are not going to spring out in the far-flung reaches. They're not even needed, quite honestly, but they're just not going to happen. Probably. Right. I'm almost pretty damn sure.
You're right. Let's close out this topic. Rhivre, do you have anything else?
No, I just catch up with Dirk on what Dirk said about the previous. There was 2 charity citadels earlier in the year.
Well, there was the big project one. What was the big project one?
The big project one. That's changed owner. It's now Angelica Evenstar, who is in charge of that project. Angelica's done a couple of presentations at FanFest about how to be an EVE trillionaire. But I haven't heard anything more on that. And as far as I know, the Care for Kids Keepstar down in Losec is still doing big ship trades.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was talking more about that the first one that you were talking about, because that sounded like it was going to be high sec, and that's where we got into this, the whole discussion about charity, social shielding, and stuff like that. Because, and I only bring it up because I wonder how that would do sitting there, whether or not Lenny would attack that if it had come up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the concern with, like you said, it takes years for hubs to get established, and it's not a major concern. But my concern is that if he's saying that I'm going to make this network of trade hubs and they're going to be protected by, or Crib is going to be involved, so they're going to be permanently open for everyone. Is that a thing that we want in EVE? Isn't the whole point of EVE that, yeah, you can screw people over if you want to? And by having this whole network of essentially perfectly safe trade hubs, you're removing part of that.
Well, no, because I mean, that is a form of gameplay in and of itself, right? I mean, as long as there is a counter to it, right? And the counter to a lack of trust is to find somebody that everybody trusts. So, I mean, I don't think it's wrong that somebody would form something like that. And if Cribbo was involved in putting his stamp of approval on it and things like that, because, he's being paid to do that and everybody trusts him, and that's fine.
Yeah, I want to reinforce that point, because I think that that's really, really important for everybody to keep in mind, which is that we can criticize his rationale, we can criticize his methodology, we can criticize whether or not it's a smart thing to do with ISK or whether or not he should have that ISK. But this is EVE at its best. Like, this is what EVE was made for, was to allow these kinds of gameplay to play out and allow us to all watch it and allow everybody to make their decisions about what they're going to do with this situation, right? EVE works because EVE's trust is created by us. In other games, the trust of the game is in the game itself. There's mechanisms that make it so that you can trust other people because they can't screw you over. In EVE, you have to build that. And so this is end game EVE playing out.
The only problem, you're right, but the only problem I have with it is it's very much all or nothing, and that's debilitating to building things together. And CCP really needs to work on that. They know that, and we know that, and maybe that'll happen in the future.
There are still things that need to happen with you, but I'm just saying, like, the fact that this gameplay can play out is not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
I'd like to get screwed over in a small way, not with not everything, because I wanted a guy to build a little ship for himself. I don't want to lose all my stuff. That's not a good mechanic. Anyway, thanks very much, Rhivre. Thanks for staying up. We know it's super late over there, so if you would like to take off, no problem. But you're welcome to stick around. We're going to move on to other topics now. These are topics that have already been covered by other podcasts, so we don't want people who are on the road to, unfortunately, have to listen to the same thing over and over again. But I would like to go over them very briefly, and we'll move through these quickly, and then we'll get to some nullsec news.
This is EVE. We talk about the same subjects over and over and over again on
I
every
know.
show.
Same people, same topics.
Well, no, it's not even just that it's the same people sometimes. It's these are the topics of EVE at any given time, and any one of these podcasts is likely to be talking about the limited number of topics that are available at any moment.
Okay, well,
check out the Astro Hour now on SoundCloud.
Did you move to SoundCloud? I was thinking of moving. All right, we'll talk about shopping later, but let's talk about links now. Like, who wants to open up links real quick?
God.
How are they? I know. How are they changing real quick? Besides being called buffs.
All right, so the really quick summary is that links are no longer going to just be system-wide. Instead of being very specific buffs for each module, there's going to be a module for each type of buff or each type of link, so armor, skirmish, so on and so forth. And then there will be scripts or ammo that gets put inside that dictates what the buff is. There will be, when the module is fired, it will pulse out, and basically everybody within a certain range, which we don't know what the range is, will receive that buff for a period of time. It sounds like it's going to be about 1 to 2 minutes. And then that buff is applied no matter what happens to the buffing ship for that time. And that's pretty much what's coming.
Asher, you actually talked about this on your last show.
I did indeed.
Yeah, you went into some details with other FCs, and you guys kicked around some. What's
I
the
can be
big?
more bombastic if you want.
What's the big takeaway for this?
The big takeaway is that CCP's war on mobile doctrines has continued unabated. These guys, they're holding me and other FCs down because they're jealous of our skills, and Fozzie is embarrassed.
So you like the fast ships, yeah, things changing constantly and things moving around fast and that sort of stuff, and it's hard to keep up with that, right?
Yeah. The problem with that is that at a certain speed, you can't really do command destroyers anymore. They're just too slow, and not only too slow, they don't align well, and so they get left behind even if they have the same speed. And so with the new links, you'll have to bring command destroyers on, which are obviously faster than command ships, but they have no tank. So if you want to fly something like a fast hack fleet, you're going to have to make a compromise that you did not have to before. And also, fast doctrines tend to get strung out a little more than slow ones. And if they make the pulse too small, like say it's like a 10-kilometer pulse, then you're going to have people who who lose the link. And if it's like a speed link, then they're even slower than the fleet before. So you have a compounding effect. So there's a lot of concerns if you're a person who likes to do fast doctrines.
Let me unpack that for a second. So you're saying that fast doctrines, the ships get spread out more because people are making decisions at different times. So they spread out more, and if you're only covering a certain area, people may fall out of that easier.
Yeah. If the link radius is too small, if it's 100 kilometers, it won't matter. But if it's 10 kilometers, it'll matter a lot. It just depends on how they tune it.
Right. Because if you're a slow-moving ball of battleships, it's a lot easier to get that inside of 10 kilometers.
Exactly.
All right, what do you guys think? Dirk, you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I sort of look at this and just say, I don't know how they're talking about making something more enjoyable to play that isn't really gameplay right now. It just sort of exists, and it gives all these people their bonuses and whatnot, and that they want to make it more enjoyable. I just don't know how enjoyable it's going to be. I really don't know who this is technically benefiting.
So we've discussed this a lot.
Other than it gets away from that whole, everybody knows that this whole system-wide boost thing from stuff that's hiding out in the middle of nowhere is bad. I just don't know that this is like a super cool solution.
Yeah, so we discussed this like literally 10 times on my podcast for the last 8 months, because they announced the idea a long time ago. And every time, pretty much every FC I talked to about it said it could work, but they're going to have to change command ships a little bit to make it work. And they have not indicated they're going to do that. So it'll be interesting to see how they do it. I will say this. I always feel bad asking for links. Like, I don't like to have to ask for a role it's just boring. Either you have to do extra work, meaning you're bringing your alt along, and he's probably going to die if there's a virtue probe set because you can't pay attention to him and flying the fleet at the same time, or you're doing it solo, and that's even worse. You're just sitting in space doing nothing.
Right. Yeah. You're just kind of following the fleet, listening to everybody else have fun.
I mean, from the command destroyer aspect side of it, it's going to be like asking for people to bring dictors.
Yeah.
Bring this ship that's probably going to be primaried anytime it is visible anywhere. You're going to die quite often.
Well, that's what the game's changing into. It's going to move away from having useless alts that you have to dual box to everybody has a role. I think that's their idea, to make everybody valuable in a situation.
Yeah, and that is something I agree with totally, because just sticking a ship in the middle of space and putting the prop mod on, letting it burn off in the direction while it's giving boosts, and then you do something else on your other character is just. Do you when you especially when you consider especially when you consider that the majority of players in EVE have one account. It's only the higher, sort of the older players and the higher end players that have more than one account. So why exclude a good chunk of the EVE player base from a game mechanic? Because I'll penalise them just because you need a link ship and they have to go and sit in space.
Are these necessary at all? Is the idea of boosts necessary at all?
Okay, can I just say? Can I just say that I'm super pumped for this change? I am super
Yeah,
excited.
ditto.
This has me wanting to come back and fly all the time again. So if you want to talk about who it's benefiting me, and I can explain to you why if you want.
You want to fly a command destroyer, or you just want to come back and fly in a fleet that has these going on?
I don't care. Oh yeah, no. I want to fly a command destroyer. I want to fly an EOS. I've been wanting to do this stuff for years. This was like this is the gameplay that I actually originally started building towards once I got cloaking. This was this next thing I really started wanting, and the more I found out about it, the more I was disappointed. And what they're basically building is what I want. And I'm sorry if that makes other people upset, but I play bards in other games too. They're building my gameplay.
Why are you playing
I
Eve
like,
wrong?
I like support. I like active support classes. Yeah, like that's totally true. Can I mention it's not just kiting that's the concern. This has been a concern for a long time. Is that the Damnation is so much better than the other command ships as a tanky fleet ship. The Vulture is way worse. So if you're going to run,
Yeah, totally.
if you're going to run a battleship like a Rattlesnake fleet or a Macario fleet, the choice becomes super obvious because those Vultures are going to get volleyed off quicker than the Damnations, and then it's going to just be a race to kill the Lynx.
Let me be clear. I do not share your pessimism, and I am under the assumption that they're going to also rebalance command ships at the same time. I may be wrong,
Yep.
and if I'm wrong, that will
I'd
change
go
my
with that
opinion.
too.
But that's my assumption.
I think you're wrong. I mean,
I might be wrong.
They're slow rebalancing stuff these days, but who knows?
But
But
when
it would
they
be
did
the
the
time
balance
to do it.
pass on the when they did the balance passes on the battle cruisers, they didn't really touch command ships. Like they rebalanced the whole line and introduced the navy ships and everything else, and then didn't touch the command destroyers. Why didn't they touch the command destroyers? Probably because
You
they
mean
were
the command
working
ships.
out
Command
what
ships.
to do.
Command
Yeah,
ships.
that's what I meant. The command ships. Why didn't they touch them? It's probably because they were waiting to work out how to do this bit first before they went in and started messing with them. So
Well, they straight up said that. They said in the blog, they were like, yeah, we're touching this now, but this is going to be hopefully a bigger change in which we're changing boosts altogether. And in fact, every single time I've ever heard command ships talk about being rebalanced, it's always kind of loomed over the head that we don't really want to seriously rebalance command ships because what we really want to do is fix boosting. And so I would be shocked. I would be very disappointed if they don't.
I retract what I said. You may be right because I remember those announcements too.
You know what's going to be really interesting is going to be like Vulture and Sleipnir fleets are going to now just have every link they possibly could want, and you can't headshot the links when they're like that.
That is 100% true, and that's one of the more interesting ramifications. Like Drake fleets will also be the same way. T1 Drake fleets will have every boost in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so that's one side of it is the actual mechanics, and it's a little bit foggy. They're still going to make some announcements going. Those things are supposed to hit when? Do we know?
November.
Okay, so we got some time before we'll probably really nail it down by EVE Vegas, which is in October. But the other side of it is the skills are going to change or not.
Skill
be
points.
Useful. Yeah. So what are we looking forward to there?
Skill point outflow.
So I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. You've basically got 3 skills that you need to reuse, but there's a lot of things here that you could apply skills to, right? 5% longer duration on your buffs, 5% increased range on your buff radius. You can do all kinds of different things with those, and then you just take, you rename Fleet Command 1 and whatever, and then roll them out and you're good. You don't have to worry about anything. I think they've done something similar to that.
I think you've nailed it. I think there will be no refunds. It'll be all it'll all be repurposed skills, stuff like that.
One of the things I talked about on
by the way, because that's a huge payday, right? We're talking about 15 million in that branch. 15 million.
Well, just Fleet Command 5 is really the big one, and Wing Command 5 sort of, but you would still need all the link skills to use them presumably.
Yeah, nobody's getting refunded the link skills, which is the massive chunk of that 15 million. The 3 leadership skills would be the ones that would get refunded, if anything. But yeah, I just think that they're just going to be repurposed. The other thing, though, is, and I mentioned this on Grid because you're not the only podcast talking about this. No, but
We're just the most beautiful one.
There you go. It's the Battle of the Ashes, talking about their other podcasts.
That's right. Asher and Asher. Yeah.
So any rate, I lost my point. Darn it! All that smack talk.
Ah,
I'll get back to it.
Not it's me losing points after I've had a few beers, but not this time. Man.
Oh right, no. So it's what it is I think that skill extraction, while not necessarily mechanically required for this change, I think that it was required for the community for this change, because now they don't have to refund your skill points. They just have to give you some sort of use. And if you just say, oh, because prior to skill extraction, all people would be like, but that's my whole alt. You've just ruined my entire character. And yes, that's a stupid thing to complain about because you've made that choice and you've gotten that stuff, but people are still going to argue it. But now they can just say, well, you can extract it if you want and get value out of it. And so that helps make these kinds of massive changes possible.
That's really incisive and an excellent point. Like you've nailed the psychology, I think, of it, that it gives them cover that they didn't have before.
I told you we were the most beautiful podcast. It's great points, smart people, all in the same room. Yeah, you don't have to go to different podcasts. You just come here. They've already thought their scratch paper podcasts are already done the thinking. It's all delivered to you here. Anyway, thanks for joining us, everyone. Let's move on if we're ready. We want to talk about the changes that have been long awaited to the Rorqual, which is the biggest fleet. I guess it's the capital industrial ship for EVE. And mining fleets are supposedly the ones that use these to mine in, deep space and stuff. But the fact is everybody parks it in a safe pause and just runs the boosts for their miners who run away from anything that approaches them. So the gameplay is kind of broken. These ships kind of just sit in garages most of the time or are used as boosting ships in a safe place. That's totally changing now. And one of you guys want to tell us how?
Another total use of a game mechanic which just involves sitting off grid somewhere and not doing very much.
Yeah, it's kind of attack on the grid on the useless alts, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Because ships in space, like doing something somewhere, means it's a target for someone hunting those ships down, and it creates content for other people. So, I'm all for it.
Well, I mean, it's not to say that Rorquals weren't out in belts before. Rorquals were in belts before. I mean, I would have one of my Rorquals in the pause, sieged up, giving boosts, right? And the other Rorqual would be out in the belt, near the belt, within tractor range of the miners, sucking in cans.
Okay,
and
so
then would fly them back to the pause, and so it wasn't like there wasn't a Rorqual out there, because I mean you do need haulers, and that's a really nice.
Well, was that before
hauler.
the freighters could pick up the mining cans? I was like,
no, that Rorqual would go out there and he would be aligned to where he was supposed to go, and as cans got dropped, he'd be pulling them in because of the tractor beams. So you don't have to be.
So
on
the trick
top
is
of the miners.
He's always aligned so he can get out of there if somebody comes into the system.
Yep,
pretty much.
Right. So right now, Rorquals give really awesome boosts, but they have to be in a siege mode, which makes them extremely vulnerable. The mechanic was always kind of bad, negative. People wanted to, people always use passes to protect themselves when sieging, but over time, capitals changed, and the Rorqual always kind of stayed the same. And also over time, the game changed. So Rorquals used to be able to do compression, and that was a big deal. And then compression got moved into passes and other places, and it became, you more and more of the functionality got actually replicated in other places. And so the
compression used to be so bad in that.
It just
oh my god, you used to have blueprints and do manufacturing jobs. It was horrible, just fucking horrible.
Right, and so, but
instant.
over time, you don't need to do any of that because you can do it in other places. But the counter to that is that Rorquals just became less and less useful, and so there's always been this promise of a change, and the change.
Well, wait a minute. Right before you say that, one of the big problems was that it was affected by the jump changes. People were asking that it shouldn't be, but it was affected, and part of the offset was that we'll fix this for you, we'll make it worthwhile, and that's 2 years ago.
Right.
And the third thing that affected it as well a lot was the proliferation of outposts and things throughout nullsec, because where the Rorqual was kind of, you jump it about with its mining fleet in the hold, you fly your fleet out there and you unload your barges and you mine away, and then you load it up, crunch everything up, and jump it back out again.
And the change to jump clones.
Yeah,
and the change to jump clones took away a bit of a feature of them. Yeah, like I said, they got kind of pieced apart over time. So not only did they just not get rebalanced for 4 years, which is kind of normal in EVE, they also literally just got worse over time because a lot of their functionality got moved to better systems. So now it's time for a change, and a lot of people were excited about it, but a lot of people were trepidatious about it. And the big reason why is because basically everyone plays a Rogue as a booster in a POS. So the people who are still committed to being in the Rogue are very committed to being safe, right? They've gotten used to it. That's their play style. And now they're being moved to the belt. And so that's causing a lot of people to freak out. But CCP is trying to compensate for that. They're trying to say, okay, guys, if you come to the belt in order to do your boosts, we're going to give you the tank of a fax. We're going to give you some sort of increased firepower, which they haven't really specified, but I'm guessing is fighters. And a super weapon that allows you to kind of stasis the whole fight, not webify, but like just freeze all of your mining fleet for some period of time. I think last we heard was 5 minutes. So that way your defense fleet can come and you guys can do an honest fight. So they're saying with those things now, if you want to use these super, super powerful Rogue boosts, they have to be brought onto field. So that's basically the change.
All right, awesome. Well, look forward to that. That's a capital ship I really like. I actually don't want it to just be a booster ship. I would like to... It's also going to be the best miner out there. So if you want to mine, you could do it just from a Rorqual because of the new drones. And
Right now, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right now, I'm in a colossal asteroid belt with approximately 90 other goons and procurers. For some reason, we have decided that we're going to mine now, since they since our beloved Greases were taken from us. And I want to tell you something. 90 procurers is a pretty tough nut to crack. We had some guys show up with some command destroyers and jump some of our procurers off with a double jump, and we just jumped onto them and we killed like 6 peoples and some other stuff. So we were mining away cancer from the game. But
well, that's how you guys. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So you guys remember the Chimera thing that we used to do, right? Where we would have, we would jump in 15 Chimeras to a guy who got tackled. If the Rorqual changes happen like that, and by the way, most of the time that worked out, but every now and again there was the giant whelp, where we just got overconfident. So most of the time that worked fine. I think if the Rorqual changes happen, there might be 40 Rorquals in a belt, or a colossal anomaly, and that'll work out really well until it doesn't.
I just put up on the screen, it's 2013 Rorqual changes. Like, that's how long this stuff has been waiting to happen. So it's good that it finally did. They've apologized many times for not getting to this ship for a long time. And Asher, you bringing up that Goonswarm is back in the mining business cracks me up, because it's kind of where you guys started. You guys were little rogue miners in Syndicate, and you guys were using cruisers so you could book if you guys were getting attacked. And Mittani said that was some of the funnest stuff he's ever done.
We rented the 2 bottom asteroid belts, not a system. Like, we were entitled to 2 asteroid belts to mine in like Ospreys and stuff.
Oh, that's pretty. I don't know, but that's really like I wasn't in Goonswarm, but that makes me really happy that you're renting just belts. Those little stories I love. That's funny, but one of the things that the Rorqual is going to get to, and I don't know if we've talked about this, but the defensive stasis that it puts out is kind of controversial now because it's not completely defined. So people think it might be OP or whatever, but essentially it freezes it puts all the ships inside of its fleet into every mining ship, I'm sure, into a stasis that it can't be harmed for a period of, let's say, 5 minutes is what they've kicked around, and that keeps it safe. So you guys have any thoughts on that?
They're calling it a stasis, but it's going to be a tether. I mean, obviously, that's the mechanic they're going to use. I would be shocked if it was anything else.
Well, they said that you can't move or warp away.
Yep.
Okay.
That might be why the stasis is kind of a freezing thing.
Yeah, they said it's basically locking you down. And one of the questions that I guess isn't clear is whether or not the Rogue itself will be part of the lockdown.
I thought in the graphic they
The
showed.
Rorqual? Yeah.
It looked like it was
Yeah, the
surrounded as
Rorqual.
well.
That's what I was
It
thinking.
applies it to itself, and it applies it to the other industrial ships within its fleet.
Speaking of which, that effect is super cool looking. I just want to point that out.
Is that a
before we
final
go any
effect,
further.
or is that just a work in progress? Because I thought
either way.
it looked like a conceptual drawing to me. I couldn't tell what it was. That was on
No,
the
it's a
07 show.
screenshot.
If you guys want to have a look at this, you can go to CCP Games YouTube and look up the 07 show and look up the latest episode. I don't think it's actually called 07 show, unfortunately. And that has a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today. So that was last Sunday.
I
mean,
probably shouldn't say this
Okay.
I probably shouldn't say this on the air, but I just had an idea for an epic AWACS. If the goons are putting, 100 miners in a belt and maybe a number of Rorquals, if you had one Rorqual lock them all in place for 5 minutes while your fleet was ready to come out of the wormhole, that would actually be really kind of awesome.
I was already thinking about that. The only thing is that you would have to have a Rorqual in the fleet, and that seems like a lot to do to kill a mining fleet.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that idea.
yeah, no,
Just
my brain
hold
went
everybody
there
in
too.
place.
It's like, hold on, let me join your fleet, and then that's how you really do it. You just join one of the public fleets or something like that, if you can somehow get into it, and then you just join, warp your Rorqual, lock them down, warp in your fleet, kill everybody, and then jump the Rorqual out.
Now, I guess what the super weapon does is it creates an invulnerability period for the Rorqual and the other industrials that are within the fleet, right? Supposedly, I guess that's going to be 5 minutes. One of the things they comment on is about the fact of being able to call for reinforcements, and apparently the thing would be able to light. You would be able to light a Sino. You can't apply DPS when under the effects of this super weapon, or this super defensive, whatever they're calling it. But apparently you could light a Sino, and now there's this question of whether or not invulnerable 5-minute Sinos are something that should be a thing.
Yeah.
I guess they're revisiting something related to that.
Like the links, the devil will be in the details.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. So much for the Rorqual, and I'm sure there's other stuff they're going to announce too. CCP made a big deal out of saying, "Hey, we're back from summer, and so now we're ready to go," because there was kind of a dip in numbers over the summer, and hopefully
They're adding an extra high slot to the procurers, so you can have a Sino and a nude or a gun or something for your
that's
for your
news.
bait procurers.
Well,
yeah,
right,
will be happy to hear that.
But they're it looks like they're making it so that all three use 2 lasers or 2 strippers.
Yeah, I didn't see where they were adding. Are you sure?
Yeah,
on Sissy, you saw where they're adding an extra slot to. Well, hold on.
All of them have 2 high slots now.
Correct. All of them have 2 high slots, and all of them will be using 2 lasers.
I'm talking about I'm talking about bait procurers, the kind of people who troll around to get people to.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, you're saying because it's going from 1 to 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, all those models, I hate to keep saying, oh my gosh. So that reminds me, all of the models that they're doing changes for are fantastic. Not just the ore ones, not to take us a little bit off topic, but they just released a whole bunch of new ships models on Sissy. 5 or 6 different, or 4, I think 4 different frigates. I think it was 1 per race.
Griffin, the Maulus.
Yeah, it was the Maulus.
The
probe.
Stiletto. Well, basically whatever the slasher hull, and the probe. So that's those 4.
And the executioner, so 5 at least. But
yes, the executioner as well. Yeah,
all of them look like it's very interesting what they've done, because it's obvious that with all of these new ones, at first blush, it's very difficult to see that there is a change. Especially the Maulus. The Maulus is actually if you just saw the Maulus, you may not even realize that the model had changed. But they all kind of look just a little bit sleeker, and the warp animations on some of these things are fantastic. The new ore ones you can see the churning bay in the middle, and it's glowing, and there's fire and smoke and everything. And I know it had animations before, but it's even better now. The stiletto folds forward like the freaking bat plane.
Yeah,
it's
it looks
amazing.
That's my favorite one.
That's the best one. The Griffin model is probably my favorite, which, as a funny little fact, was designed originally by who's now known as CCP Pointy Bits before we worked for the company. It's in fact that design that got him the job at CCP.
That's correct. And a lot of the new model redos that we've been seeing has been thanks to him. So thank you, CCP Pointy Bits, for being amazing. The thing I like about the Griffin set, though, is that all of them look very different. Like, you can tell that they're all super advanced arrays, but you can also kind of tell that each of them come about it from a different level of tech and a different philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, that rounds out some of the changes and some of the stuff's going on in HiSec. We want to get to NullSec and cover some of the news that's up there as well. We'll start with something that Asher is familiar with, and that's FC Asher. Let's talk about Delve and Goons. You guys came into Delve, and why don't you tell us what happened?
Well, it was all occupied, but it didn't have sort of that giant force that some regions have. There's Lumpy, League of Unaligned Master Pilots. They're a bunch of ex-Evoke Nazis and other people, mostly Germans.
Wouldn't call them Nazis, but yeah.
I'm sorry. Did I not say Evoke? Evoke Nazis. They're from Evoke. Anyway, they were there, and then Tactical Supremacy, which is Faulty Sevens, Australian Time Zone Corp. They're there, and then there wasn't really any U.S. time zone presence. There's also some Russians and some other people, and then there were a lot of Care Bears. So,
well, it should also be said, though, for a long time, not for a long time, but a few weeks, say a month ago, and before for a few months, was Goon Swarm Alliance, right? Because Darius Johnson had reformed some goons, and they were in that area.
Goons.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is now renting from Pandemic Horde.
He took off before you guys came there, right?
Yeah. We should actually offer him some space now that I think about it. We can give him a constellation so the True Goons can have Delve again. So moving down here, the first week they gave it the old college try to fight us. They called down PL and NC Dot through a wormhole and stuff like that. But not much has actually happened since then. They've basically ceded the region to us, and they're just trying to make it hard to take. And for our part, we're trying not to repeat past mistakes, and we are going after mostly, we're going after constellation by constellation. And a lot of the space we've taken was essentially just to break the iHubs and break the strategic 5 index, so that if we hold it, that's fine. But if they take it back, it doesn't matter. When we actually turn our eye to that system, it'll still be low ADM because it won't have strategic 5. So that's kind of what's going on now with us.
Oh, cool. Let me point out, this is, before you talk, this is Delve I have on the screen, and I just want to point out, here's the NPC area where anybody can stage, pretty much. This is a rich ratting area here. And here has really good space as well, and it looks like Goon Swarm Federation has both those areas. And down here as well in C3N is a nice capital because it's kind of a good location in general. Those are the major points. And in the middle here you have NOL, Null, and that's a very sought-after place, and it looks like that's reinforced from Tickle.
A lot of history there.
Yeah.
So,
V's crew.
So hold on, I got a quick question. As not a Sov guy, what do you mean by this? They've seeded them, but they're still fighting you. Like, how have they seeded them if they're basically still doing everything they can to thwart you?
They're not. It's the problem with Fozzy-Sov is that it's trivially easy to make it very hard to do. So 10 guys can cause you a lot of trouble, even if you have 500 people, in your fleet. And so we've had multiple timers that went. We had one fleet that went 8 hours to try to take them Sov, and
God.
We're known for poo socking, but I mean it's not a good system. It's a bad system. So they're taking the time with interceptors and stuff like that and jamming ships to make it as hard for us as possible. But they aren't actually legitimately trying to hold the space. That's the difference. And in Fozzy-Sov, you don't have to make a legitimate effort to hold your space. To make it annoying for someone else, you just have to have the will to be annoying.
Yeah, I mean, this is following the conflict as much as I have been able to since it started, and I've been doing a series of articles on EN24 about it as well. Lumpy, along with Tickle and a few of the other groups there, put up a lot of their initial resistance in the first week and a half, I would say. That's when you saw sort of the big battles. That's when PL and then C came down, where you had 2 or 3 fights worth somewhere in the region of 40, 50 billion ISK each. But once that initial assault, which was focused on the constellation that contains one SMEB, which is the connecting system to Iridia, fell, and goons were able to put up the Fortizar in that system as well, to act as a forward staging point into the rest of the region. Then you started seeing the resistance collapse, because even though ship for ship, the Delve residents were doing pretty well, they still were outnumbered and they were still losing strategic objectives. So constellation by constellation, Imperium's taking one chunk at a time and slowly pushing out. Like Wing Wanderers, who were the last lot to go, literally just up sticks and just vanished. They just disappeared. Lumpy is still around, but without their soft, they hold one system, if I remember correctly. All they're reduced to at the moment is harassing the Entosis fleets for the goons as well. So that's where it is at the moment.
So after all this happened, I think Test was sent down on contract by Lenny, again, Kravitz. And
they arrived last week, yep.
Yeah, and so they arrived last week. And so Goonswarm staging out of here, socked, or was. And this,
we've since moved, yeah.
Yeah, this station here, UHKL, is where Test landed. And you can see they're in NPC space here, which is kind of funny. They're a little bit far from the action, but maybe that's on purpose. So what's happened since they arrived?
I don't really know why they chose that. Like, obviously I can't read their minds, but it is the first system that is not in direct jump range from our staging, which is DTAC W. So maybe that was a consideration. It's not in. It's you have to go through one gate to get to UHKL. Every other system pretty much is in direct drop range.
Well, that said, the stations, the old stations, which is what's in those systems, is easier to camp than a new Astra House or whatever.
Yeah, it's been kind of a flop for them. They've been doing some Black Ops drops. They killed a dreadnought today, and they killed a carrier a couple days ago. Ratting ships with bombers, but that's about all they've done as far as fighting. I mean, we've had some fights, but we've pretty much won those. And
let's say at this point, Pro God actually screamed at his guys. Is that where you were going to go?
No, that's been talked to death, and I know you said we're going to go over the same topics, but I was going to let you bring it up if you wanted to.
It's nothing. He just screamed at his guys, and it was no big deal. So we'll continue if there's nothing about that.
Pure Eve.
But it caused a lot of laughs and stuff like that. But Tiberius, what were you going to say?
Actually, that video that was released by Ministry of Truth about that was just brilliant. I love that bit of that music video that was released. If you haven't seen it, it's really, really funny. But I would kind of disagree as an outside observer. We're currently stuck up in the north, just sitting there in our Keepstar. As an outside observer, I would kind of disagree. Other than Wing Wanderers, just up sticks and leaving, I'm seeing a slowing of momentum in the capture of systems. Like the constellation with one Sameb, the constellation with Tickle, they fell reasonably quickly. They fell within the first week. In the last week, there hasn't been much movement on the Imperium side, from what I see in capturing systems.
Oh, no, yeah,
there's
not
been
at all.
plenty of them reinforced.
Intentionally slow. Because like we said, we learned from sort of past mistakes where we just had too much SOV and no reasonable way to hold it. So
Don't take more than you need.
So that's why you're in a mining fleet, right? You're getting the ADMs up, probably.
Yeah, we got Industry 5 up now.
So it's going to be a slow process to get all that stuff.
You'll notice we didn't leave one SMEB until we had them all like 4.6 or higher. So, and then we moved on to, that's when we moved to DTW, but we specifically waited. That's what I talk about, the top of the map of those former Tickle systems. We broke the strategic index there, but, that's going to be our involvement there for the time being. If Test wants to put down iHubs and TCUs, or if anyone wants to, they can, and we're not going to bother defending it hard, because for that exact reason.
Yeah. Do you chalk that up to this is just a smart way to proceed with, given the mechanics as they are for sovereignty control?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no other. Well, you could just go for a huge, like, burn out all your guys type op, but like I said, just capturing that tickle space took 8 hours for one constellation. And you can only ask your guys to do that so many times before you're asking them to have a full-time job of playing EVE. And so that's you have to consider that.
And this is what you guys were doing in the north, right? When you were taking back some parts of Pureblind, you were actually having some success doing it this way.
We started out.
This was the plan before you guys decided to say, "Forget this area, we're going south."
Yeah, sort of at the very end, we were thinking about making a push in Pureblind, and we took like 2 constellations and then ratted them up. But we like I think we said at the time, we just didn't we underestimated how much resistance we would get from most of the entirety of the NBC. So it quickly became clear that it wasn't going to be something that could last long term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how do you feel?
It's a sound strategy.
How do you feel, Asher, about Goonswarm's strength and position now? After, I imagine the war is over, or is the war continuing, the Hell War?
No, the war is over as far as as far as that action. There's people who make the argument that World War I never ended; it just started up again in 20 years because the actions were tied together, and that's a valid argument. But World War I ended in 1919 or 1917, something like that. 1919, I think. Okay, there you go. World War II started 20 years later, and so same thing in EVE. We'll have another war, and we'll have a reconquest probably, but not for a long time. We don't plan to leave Dell for, I think, at least a year.
Oh, it's a long time.
I mean, if you don't have a casino funding you have to rebuild your reserves. We were spending. I know the propaganda on Reddit was that goons were undocking, but we were spending $500 billion a month on reimbursement. That was monthly during World War B. So
you're just burning through those ships, right?
Yeah, I think when I ran, I think when CCP Quant released all the kill stats for the North, I think it was sort of in the roundabout, not long after MTACO, but before SMA had abandoned their space in Fade.
Mm-hmm.
The Imperium had lost somewhere in the region of about 4 trillion ISK worth of ships. And that was also in comparison to the NBC, who again lost very similar sort of figures. So we were looking at almost 10 trillion ISK worth of ships being burnt through in the space of 4 months, which is massive. And
if you look at the market indices at that time, I mean, they were huge. There was so much movement in the market, so much building.
Well, how do you feel about Goonswarm right now? What's the give us the state of the union on Goonswarm strength?
State of the Union, you mean?
Well, state of the union is good too.
Yeah. I mean, our participation is really strong. Like I think our numbers are down compared to the end of World War B, but it's because we're doing Fozzy-Sov, and it's something that most of our players hate. So you really have to try to motivate people and rah them to get them to do it. But if someone came to fight us, they would shoot right back up, which is sort of what we saw during World War B. When we were sort of on periods where we were just sort of not fighting, our numbers would go down, and then once we started fighting hard again, they would go back up. But the only decision to make once it was clear that the war was unwinnable, once we were so outnumbered there was no chance to win, was to save the super fleet, and we did that, and you're seeing it already. That's one of our strengths down here, is that we have a super fleet. They don't. I know Tessa's got some plans for that, but that's still something it's something they have to consider every time. and
Well,
our
that's what they're
numbers
down
are-
there to attack, right? They're out to take out that fleet.
I mean, I think that's what they would like to do. Yeah.
That's what they're saying, yeah.
I'm still waiting to see. I mean, they're pushing. They're clearly like doing something with the Sov there, because they've managed to capture a couple of systems. But at the same time, I'm still not seeing a huge push in from them. I mean, would you say that's a fair assessment of what they were doing?
No, I don't. I think they're just sort of biding time. Their numbers have been really low. And I would like to take this brief moment to call out their FC Darren Wakefield, from who was insistent with me earlier with 32 ruptures. I had 12 Cerberuses. He would not fight me. I would just like to call him out for being a coward.
Dude's calling someone out to be a coward. That's funny.
Hey, I resemble that statement.
Watch the sneak attacks, Tiberius.
Yeah.
No,
So
it's fine.
I think that, like, if I could rewrite the whole war, there would definitely be ways that you could have improved a lot of stuff. I think our propaganda was awful. We went misstep after misstep with that kind of thing, and there were a lot of mistakes made. And I think
what do you mean about your propaganda wing? Are you talking about stuff that was said by Mittani and stuff, or did you guys put out propaganda that wasn't funny, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I'm really not talking about propaganda so much, or I'm talking about it in the greater sense. I'm not talking about like funny pictures on Reddit. I'm talking about us getting our message out.
Failure to control the narrative.
Exactly.
But this is one thing I'm quite pleased with, because I'm starting to see like more general sort of propaganda and communication coming out, which hadn't come out. And for me, that's like one of the joys of wartime in EVE, is just seeing the back and forth from both groups. Beforehand, it used to be held on the forums, and now it's like all on Reddit. But it's great to see that going back and forth between the two opposing sides. I love it.
If your guys' propaganda gets me awesome music like that all the time and other images and stuff, keep fighting.
Dude, our miniature dudes are amazing. They put out so many good songs, and part of it is like they actually make a bunch more songs, and then they kind of just say, hey, does this meet our standard? And if it doesn't, they just don't put it out. That's when you know that you're good, when you can have discretion. That's when you know that you have like the talented people who are actually putting in hard work.
Yeah,
a few years from now, somebody will release the Lost Library.
Yeah, definitely.
The B-sides.
Yeah, they really do have that, actually.
Hey, Dirk, do you miss being part of Imperium, or are you happy in PL?
Yeah, I'm happy in PL. I mean, having been in the, which is why I still have such good relations with the people I know from the Imperium. I mean, being in the Imperium is just different than being in PL. The Imperium is about living and creating a society out in nullsec, right? That's not what
Empire
PL's
building.
about. PL's about something different.
Yeah, empire building versus empire destruction. Like
versus whatever, I mean, fighting for different reasons, but I mean, I totally understand the reason for empire building, society building, defending your space, attacking other space, whatever. Do I miss it? There are elements of it I miss. There are elements of it I don't.
I'll tell you what.
One thing you were talking about.
Yeah,
sorry, Matterall.
You go ahead, Ash. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to visit a point you brought up. Was one thing, if I could go, like, if I went back in time and had to deal with World War B again, I would like have our allies on a much tighter leash than we actually had. We had a system that had built up over time where our allies were mostly independent, but people thought they were under our thumb, and we were always very concerned about being viewed as Bob 2.0 and using meat shields and slaves and pets. So we gave our guys a lot of leash. But the problem is, like, when it came to World War B, the decisions that were made were awful by a number of our allies. I'm not saying all of them, but I'm just saying there were definitely some really terrible choices made. And on top of that, they literally were killed their own alliance. And we could have stopped them if we had I don't know if we could have stopped them, but we could have said, hey, you either fall in line or you get you walk the plank. But we weren't willing to do that at the time, obviously, because
Yeah. Well, it also it may have worked against you because that's what everybody thinks you are, is that you guys tell everybody else what to do. And that would have played into, look, these guys are really bad. They're just telling you what to do.
Yeah.
Clearly that wasn't the case because CO2 backstabbed you in the middle of a big fight. So,
in retrospect, like I said before, I don't think the war was ever winnable anyway. So it wasn't like,
I think they probably saw the writing on the wall too, and that was like, you know what, we want to keep our space. We're just going to flip because that's going to be the winning side, and why not?
Well, that's why I have a ton of respect for executive outcomes. According to Mo, the guy who runs it, they were looking, for new horizons 5 or 6 months ago, but right before the war started, and once it started, he was not going to leave because he didn't want to abandon his friends in a time of need, and that's a really respectable thing to do. Like, you're not compelled to be there, but when the chips are down, you ride with your friends, and that's what he did. And he waited till we were set up in a new place, and then at that point, he's like, all right, we're going to go now in a really amicable way. And that's the huge difference between a group like Executive Outcomes and a group like CO2. On the other hand, you haven't seen CO2 get punished for their actions at all. Like, Test has cozied up to them immediately, and they're basically a coalition now, CO2 Test.
Yeah.
So it's not like anyone learns from these kind of things.
Well, go ahead, Ash.
What's interesting is that, like, I see this playing out as basically the mentality of EVE happening on a macro scale instead of on an individual scale. So generally speaking, in EVE, if you're put against a challenge, you either can face it, you mitigate the risk until it's acceptable, and then you perform it. So like in mission running, you wait until you have enough tank and enough DPS to basically not risk anything when you go in, regardless of how much it takes to get to that point. So in a very similar way, it seems like EVE cracked the nut of the Imperium in the same way that EVE cracks everything. It just waits and builds up until it has sufficient power, numbers, and whatever else it needs in order to ensure victory without risk and mitigated risk, and then performs it.
Ashterothi, you're on point today. That's another good point. I think what I was actually going into this, like, what you said is very true. The war was a paycheck cashing for a lot of things that goons had done for a long time. For instance, we had ignored Reddit. And in fact, that Sion article that came out and said Reddit is not a community, as soon as I read that, I go, man, this really smacks of there are no goons,
Yeah.
Like, this is the kind of thing that rallies people together. And, we had ignored, that kind of thing for a long time. And we paid for it in the end because we didn't, like you said, there was no narrative control. We couldn't put our side of the story out there. And I had mentioned something like that, before, hey, we should look at this, and 2 years ago it was derided. Like, we could have had a moderation spot on there if we had just talked to someone, but instead we've been railroaded like multiple times because we never, because the people who are the moderators dislike us, and so we shot ourselves in the foot there many times. And so the war was a bunch of that stuff coming together and coalescing into one sort of event like that.
Yeah, I think the Imperium's message was out there. I mean, even though they maybe didn't have the representation on Reddit, I think that the people on Reddit knew what the Imperium's message was. So I don't think it was a matter of getting the message out. I just think that there were enough people out there that weren't buying it. And then, of course, when you started to get the dominoes falling in their favor, it's always better to be on the side of kind of the propaganda that seems to be winning.
Well, yeah, I mean, you actually see that right now. You'll see, like, it's weird. I'm saying the exact same things I was during World War B, but I am, the same comments are getting upvoted rather than just downvoted -40. So, EVE is like, remember on Battlestar Galactica, this has all happened before and will happen again? EVE is like that. It seems like it's very cyclical. Fortuna spins her wheel. Sometimes you're the king, sometimes you're the peasant.
Yeah. Speaking of Sion, he is retired as the chief diplomatic personality for Goon Swarm. I think he's actually retiring from EVE itself, and maybe even TMC. And so, we wish him well because, he's pretty much going to leave the game because he got better things to do with his real life. And I'm thinking he's not wrong, like sometimes we play this game a bit much. So it is kind of a, what do you call it?
Heathen. Blasphemy.
Wake up call to see someone that I'm close to, because we worked together on TMC for so long, leave, because I think that might not be the worst idea. But
well, you know what? And this is one of the things that I tried to do after the first of the year, right? Was try and shed a number of responsibilities. He is a guy that was loaded on a number of different levels, whether it be what he was doing within the Corps Diplomatique, within Goonswarm management itself, within what he was doing with TMC, and these things start to pile up, and all of a sudden you're crowding out other areas of life.
Yeah, I would say, I've met him a few times, and obviously the guy has been characterized at this point in the general community. But having talked to him now, I think 3 or 4 times, and actually that we had an hour-long conversation with him after one of the shows, which was really awesome. He just seems like a guy who cared a lot, but at a certain point, he's not enjoying this anymore. It's very clear. So if you're not enjoying EVE, then that's fine, whatever it is, burnout or, whatever, maybe you'll come back someday, but I'm glad that he is taking the opportunity to step back and, whatever.
Sometimes you need a chance to go to college and reinvent yourself away from your high school buddies.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard he's joining PL.
Yeah. Well, doesn't everybody when they retire? There's a shot. Okay.
The retirement home for vets.
Let's move on because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's move on to Fountain War. There's something going on up there. Is that right?
There is. I don't know too much about.
Okay, let's skip Fountain.
The basic of it is
the culture's kicking Violate out of Fountain right now.
Pretty much, it's Fountain Core, which is the gangbang team and all that, who have always traditionally been the residents of that central Serpentis NPC bit, along with the culture and a few others. They kind of branched out and started taking some systems and holding that. I'm not sure when they haven't. I think it was not long after Black Legion left, which was not long after Brave left.
Well, the culture
and they had a falling out.
The culture is old Black Legion, right? The culture
Black
is
Legion's EU time zone mostly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Plus,
but they had some sort of falling out, and now there's kind of a bit of a civil war going on in there. But I don't have any contacts there to tell me what that civil war was about. So,
well, the thing was, and this is. It's not a war of Fountain Core, is it? Or is it the people who live in Fountain? The difference?
It was just the groups that had moved in there, of which some of them are made up of Fountain Core and some of them made up of old Black Legion and things like that. But they coexisted quite happily for quite a few months, and then they had a falling out.
No, I see.
But I don't know what the falling out was about, and I'm still trying to work that one out.
Okay, great. Well, on the other side of the map of the south is Catch, right? And so we have some action going on in Catch in that Infamous has basically had another coup from...
Oh, God.
Well, this is kind of funny because it's talk about things repeating themselves. This is one of the groups that was part of the original coup against Brave, and they were one of the big groups there. And since you were in Brave, Tiberius, maybe you could tell us about this.
I've got to scratch my memory now because that was a year and a half ago now. That was all happening. But basically, J3B, which is Kelnon and Benju, who's the leaders of those group, along with a number of the CEOs, were the ones that flipped the vote. One of the first times that the actual mechanics for voting the Executive Corp was kind of used to overthrow an existing executive.
It was a very old mechanic, but this was the first time somebody used it, because normally experienced alliances will protect themselves against this maneuver because it's a democracy, and let's say you have 10 alliances. if 6 of them vote to change over who's in charge, then it goes to whoever they picked. And so what people will do, they'll stack...
As long as you get more half the votes, yep.
They'll stack the alliance full of corporations that are really only shares in that vote that are held by the dominant dominant corporation in there to protect themselves from this kind of democracy. But Brave didn't have that knowledge or didn't use that knowledge.
No.
And that maneuver was used to take over in this coup. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then after a bit of a maneuvering around again, a week later, the same thing was done by Licton to regain control of the alliance again. And literally, we have just a complete repeat of history with Infamous, with J3B pulling the same stunt and grabbing control of Infamous while their main executor was asleep. And then a week later, flipped it straight back again.
Now, besides one of the notable players inside of Infamous was Lenny Kravitz, right? That's his actual corporation. His corp is in Infamous, isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of Brave Operations Lollipop Division.
Right, because Lenny was in Brave originally.
Correct, yep. Okay,
so the other part of it is this bearded battle bears, J3B. They have a history as well because even before they were in Brave, I think they were in Nully Tetras, which was the kind of the Renter Alliance or the junior alliance to Nully Segunda. And so it seems like this corporation is known for their capital ships, right?
Yeah, I mean they build them and they sucked up as many of the capital ship pilots as they could from Brave when that was about.
That's what I mean. So in Brave, they took over a lot of the capital ship pilots because they wanted to be these like players, I guess. And this is all run by the same guy, Kelnon Telth there, who I have to say wasn't a big fan of mine after I wrote the Brave story because it portrayed him as somebody who was kind of rigging things in the background.
And which he was.
Which I guess he was. Enough people said that he was that So anyway, so it happened all over again, but this time in Infamous, it broke it up. And so in rushed, it looks like AAA and Volt or Volition Coalition. Let's see, who took over their space in Catch? Volt jumped in there, and Volt actually broke away from Proviblock. Volt is run by Core Blood Brothers, who is an FC and a former CSM member, and they went ahead and took over a lot of the space that Infamous left, right over in this area. You can see their big patch, and then it looks like AAA took some of the stuff. Yeah, so that got taken right away.
AAA doing their usual thing and just filling in the void when somebody goes,
Right. So. In this southern area also, this is all near Stain, and do we know what's going on in Stain? I hear that war is winding down.
Let me find my notes.
While you're looking for notes, let's see. The QFC, Quarius Fight Club, looks like it got taken out of Quarius. You didn't run into them down there, did you, Asher?
What about Quarius Fight Club? I couldn't hear the beginning. I'm sorry.
You didn't actually. Have you run into Quarius Fight Club at all? Or are those guys gone before you got there?
Yeah, it seems that they're evacuating right now. They got driven out totally independent of us. These guys in Broski North just basically scared them off by having a couple Zubers, and it looks like they've just picked up and left.
Would that have been a nice?
Yeah, pretty much.
I guess it's a fight club, so it's not really. You're not really going to make friends with a fight club to keep them around as kind of.
I would have loved to have had them there.
Really?
I mean, it would have been great.
Just kind of leverage from Quarius to Delve, since they're neighboring regions.
No, just have somewhere to go in Rome and fight. It would have been really nice.
Yeah, I don't understand what caused them just to sort of implode so readily. I mean, I know there was quite a bit of scaremongering going around amongst the groups, going, "Oh no, goons are moving next door. We're about to be invaded," and blah 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 blah. And,
Well, there's some talk about that Horde wanted them to come with them to the north because they were going to take that space and they could have the fight club up there. And a lot of people were like, "Yeah, we don't want to go. We've made our home down here, and this is where we're fighting," and that sort of thing. So there was a contract paid, and it might have been a troll because it appeared on Reddit. You can never trust Reddit. What was the group that kicked him out called? I forget. Asher, you just called it. But anyway, this group.
Broski North?
Yeah, Broski North. Basically, made their life miserable down there on behalf of PL, on behalf of Horde, to make it uncomfortable for them to be there, and they would basically just finally move out, and then Horde would say, hey, come up here and stay with us. That's all just rumor. I don't understand if that's true or not, but the point is,
well,
Brave did leave.
Brave has gone up there. Brave has moved up to Fade, where Horde is currently sitting out, along with Honor and which is Spaceship Samurai and Goonswarm, in fact.
Oh, so they've the little Goonswarm, the little old one.
Yeah, the old Goonswarm.
Okay, so that's interesting. So maybe there's
the new old Goonswarm.
Yeah, the new old Goonswarm. That
sounds like a horrible name for a political party.
That is financed by Goonswarm's
OG
enemies.
Swarm.
Yeah, OG Swarm.
We'll call them $10 bond just to keep it clear that that's them. All right, so Infamous goes down, and
the best bit of that whole Infamous thing going down was the old executive who still had control of the Renter Alliance just disbanding that, kicking every single Renter Corp out there. Oh, that was crazy.
Brave drama is still paying off years later.
Yeah. It's funny. I see them as a whole generation of people that came into the game doing things they weren't quite prepared for, and it was charming because they knew that and everybody else knew that, but it was still fun and it was fine. But they continue to make mistakes. They should be. Some of the stuff that's going on, the politics, I guess they happen in every corporation, despite how old you are. It just depends on which people are pulling the levers, I guess.
Well, they also have the philosophy of, don't overthink it, just do it, which gets you into some fun, but also can potentially get you into mistakes. Like, they accept the fact that mistakes are part of business. They're the exact opposite of what we were talking about before with risk averse. Like, they realize, well, at least before they were, and they may have lost some of that, but it seems like they've retained at least some of it, which is the spirit of, we have nothing to lose because it's a game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you look at some of the more successful groups, like Test had a very similar philosophy, and even Goonswarm had a very similar philosophy when it started out as well. Of course, both organizations have grown and expanded and evolved over that time, and then Brave kind of stepped into its place where that gap was originally. But it always seems to be a good foundation, which at least to start rolling into larger things. But the thing with Brave is they reached that height, but didn't evolve. They didn't sort of up what they were doing to keep their momentum.
Well, but one man's evolution is another man's selling out, right? Because we're talking about learning how to make alliances and how to, basically become pets, or when to not become pets. So basically, they wanted to avoid all that, and they did. But it has a price if you're going to be being, a nullsec entity. These are tested in true ways of doing things, as distasteful as they are, and it's hard to get around them. But they tried, and that's commendable, I guess. But up north, go ahead.
I'd say the problem with that, with Brave especially, was it was good that the newbies were doing it together and had a place to, learn and grow together. But the leadership was so incompetent that at some point you felt like, would it not be better for the game if someone who actually knew how to lead an alliance took these people over and retained more newbies? Because there are going to be people who try Brave newbies or their offshoots and say, "Wow, this game is pretty bad," because the leadership was so bad, and they'll leave you forever. So how do you balance those two?
I don't think you can.
It's hard trying to have kind of a loose organization where you want these people to all be having fun and enjoyment, and this doesn't mean anything. We're just having a good time. And then try and put what I'll call experienced corporate management in, because they're going to manage the organization in a way that kind of goes against the philosophy of what it was they had. and then you end up you end up losing one for the other. So I mean, if their intention was to graduate, kind of the way Goons did, the way Test did, the way a lot of other alliances that plan on becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, then they were going to eventually lose what made them the entity they were to begin with.
Maybe what they needed to do is graduate pilots, saying, you know what, you're too big for us now. It's time for you to move on. And instead of trying to give them a home inside the same organization, I could see them being, low sec, free for all, successfully for a very long time. I don't know if, as a unit, becoming a nullsec entity without wanting to take on any diplomatic ties with anyone is something that could be done. I think maybe they thought that SOV would change in a way that you could live in it, and the more numbers you had, the better, and they were depending on that. I think they were depending on that.
But again, that goes against their core philosophy, right? Their core philosophy dictates that they want to do the exciting, cool thing. Because you got to remember that these guys are, by and large, the people that showed up after Asakai, and then got to see it again after BTEC-R, right? So, this group of people, why wouldn't they shoot for capitals? Why wouldn't they shoot? This is what they've been wanting to do. And so they're doing what they got to do in order to do it, while still trying to kind of keep the spirit of fun alive. But that's they do what they must. It is in their nature to be that way.
Maybe. So let's move on to PL's moved up to Venal, right? And there's some tension up there because PL is actually kind of dormant at the moment. They're practicing for the Alliance tournament.
What are you talking about, man? We're under contract from the Greases right now.
Are you? So why don't you tell us about that?
You know what? We just moved up there the other day. I know some people have some idea of trying to go run Garista stuff or what have you. Right now, it's right now. I think it's just kind of taking advantage of whatever opportunity presents itself at any given time.
You guys are cashing in on the rich ratting up there, right? With the Garistas, you guys getting standings up and.
Well, it's just funny because we're probably right now about, I don't know, maybe like 9 jumps from where I spent like 3 years, of my time with the Imperium, and another probably 9 jumps from, when I was with CO2 and all that. So, but what's funny is that, we went on a roam the other day and we're roaming around Venal and whatnot. And they're like, man, I can't believe there's not, there's just not many people up here. And I'm like, well, it's kind of the way Venal always sort of was. I mean, they're there, but not like, it's not blanketed with people running around NPC, 0-0 up there in Venal.
Yeah. It looks like,
but basically we're within range of, hitting various different areas. So again, it just comes down to, where the content presents itself.
Yeah, so you're getting criticized, saying the truth comes out. Dirk didn't want to move his stuff.
No, I had to move it. I had to move what stuff I brought up there, again. But whatever. We went from Hakonin, on up on the Astra House, superhighway.
Yeah, and so NC Dot actually put down their Fortizar in 93. PI is on his Pure Blind right next to
93 PI. Yep.
Thank you. Good. We have Tiberius back.
Yep. For some odd reason, at this time of night, the router just goes, "Oh, I'm going to restart."
Wow. So what are we doing in NC Dot, Tiberius? And he died.
No, I'm here. Just waiting around, really, I think. It's summer, so, Alliance tournament team is practicing. A lot of the guys are out on vacation. And we're just waiting to see what happens in the next few weeks, I guess. Enjoying the Keep Star, which is great. I can dock my super pilot. That's amazing.
That's a good feeling, to be able to crawl out of that giant ship and recover a character.
Oh, man.
And to log in without worrying about getting killed because something would go wrong. Like I used to have a fear every time I'd log in a super, I'd be like, oh my God, am I going to accidentally die in an embarrassing way and get kicked out of my alliance? Yep. What about Moa? Are we taking on Moa or not? Because there seemed to be some scuffling.
Nope, not at all. There was a bit of a misunderstanding because we reset them, and one of our FCs like, "We want your moons," and they were like, "But wait a minute, we have an agreement." Well, tough, we're taking them anyway, and then there was a whole scuffle, and then Vince turn around and
That was,
and when Vince has to get involved in something, then it's pretty dire. He got involved with it and ruffled all the feathers, and after Mo was like, "Oh, we're going to declare war on NC." Rah 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 rah. 2 days later, they went, "Okay, we're not declaring war on NC anymore," and that was that.
So basically, Travis Muskrat, who's kind of the head of FCs or was for NC, came back to the game and decided to attack something he probably shouldn't have, so he's going to take some moons. That caused a problem. Vince came back and kind of settled things. That's what it sounds like. Vince is the actual leader of NC Dot.
Yeah, you don't annoy him.
How often does Vince actively play? And by that I mean interact with the game. How often is he making decisions and
Every day.
and doing stuff? Okay.
Every day.
Only when Travis starts shooting shit.
Yes.
So he's like a Mittens where he's doing something.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, he knows exactly what's going on at any time, and he's always questioning the corp leadership, like what's going on with your guys. Why did you only have so many people in the fleet? And what are your guys' opinions on this? And are we going to formulate plan for that? And so he's like extraordinarily connected, even if he just doesn't log in. And when he does log in, it's quite a big deal. It's a big morale boost for the Alliance.
Yeah, when he calls people in, it like when he's saying get into fleet, it just gets a huge response because people like flying with him. I think you have when you have history and charisma and all that stuff going for you, people want to be a part of that, even if there's not much. But for the last few minutes that we have, let's cover some stuff that's not in EVE but outside of EVE. EVE Skunk shut down. Can you tell us what EVE Skunk was?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically what EVE Skunk was a network of people who have put in API keys so that way it pulled, especially larger organizations, public mail or circulated mails and reposted them on their site. So you could go and get intel from other corporations or other alliances if it was broadcasted corporate alliance wide.
Yep. Basically, people would just leak API keys onto it, and hey presto, you had standings and emails and all sorts of stuff.
It was one of these. I thought it was a bad thing. It was inevitable, but it's because if EVE players can do it, they will do it. But it kind of put everybody's alliance mail out to the public, which means you didn't have any privacy in your mails. And that,
well, it was great for me as a writer because, if I needed to find something out, I go on the EVE Skunk. Look, there's that move.
But very.
So I would actually argue the opposite.
Yeah.
I think it does good because it dispels the illusion of security. Because there's already spies. You might as well assume your stuff's on. Yeah, just because EVE Skunk is gone doesn't mean your OPSEC is complete. But
it's not gone.
And what it did was it forced an evolution in kind of back office infrastructure for a lot of groups out there, right? I mean, you were no longer sending out, fleet call ups via alliance mail anymore. Well, you can't do that. Gotta have a forum. That's
exactly why I think it was a bad thing for the game, because it pushed even further everybody out of the game. So now you're using your own services and you just put a link. We got this thing. Here's the link. The email doesn't tell you anything, so EVE Skunk doesn't damage you. Or spies don't damage you, and everybody has to go to these outside forums to get their information.
Well, I don't know, because a forum for your corporation or guild or clan or whatever, that's pretty typical stuff, right?
Yeah, it's pretty standard.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that using an external website to coordinate your in-game effort. I think that the calendar and all that stuff is pretty cool, and actually we've been exploring with some of the tools of being able to kind of thread the two together so that way our website and our corp information is kind of in sync all the time. But beyond that, I think everyone that plays games or MMOs for a period of time is pretty used to using.
Well, I think at our scale, yes. Like every one of us knows that, you have outside forums and those are locked down and secure. But I'm thinking of people that are starting the game or people who are 1 year in and have small corporations or small alliances, or maybe they're.
But for them, EVE Skunk doesn't matter.
That's true. And my point is that I had a 10-man corp in WoW that had a guild site. You just stamp them out.
Yeah.
There are templates for those. Makes it easier.
the only corps that would actually get, because you had to get a spy into that organization in order to get the API key to get the standings and the mails anyway. So they would only, if somebody was willing to put that effort into doing that in the first place, would it ever show on there. Like your little high-sec corp or something like that would generally go unnoticed.
Well, in general, anything that pushes you out of the game, to me, it is kind of what created the meta, because all the stuff that we do outside the game is necessary to run the stuff we do inside the game. There's a lot of third-party tools and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I kind of feel like that takes away from the primary experience. Like, that's why you don't just open up the client and play the client. You open up the client, and you open up your web browser, and you open up your TS comms, TeamSpeak or whatever. And it's like 3 or 4 or 5 things that you need to do in order to actually play the game, instead of using EVE Voice, using in-game email, and just coming into the experience, playing the experience, and then getting out of the experience.
It's because EVE's not a game, man. How many times am I going to tell you that?
And to be fair, the provided EVE tools are awful.
But it's
like,
not
EVE
just
Voice
that,
is so
though.
Much worse.
It's not just that, though, because like, and I get your concern. Like, your concern, it comes from a very, very valid place, because we do kind of have this runaway of external tools in EVE. But there's a difference between public services that are required for their use, or to understand EVE. Like, for instance, Fuzzy Steve stuff. I love it. I love Fuzzy Steve's work. But 90% of Fuzzy Steve's stuff should be just stuff that's accessible from the game in a clear way.
Totally.
So, but private stuff, private infrastructure for a group of friends that are interacting with each other, I think is very different. I think that regardless of how good EVE Voice was, regardless of how good the EVE Mail was, I would still use TeamSpeak, forums, and whatnot, because when you require in-game tools now, like, because we use Slack instead of in-game chat, people can do it on their phones, people can do it from work, people can do it however they want to do it. They don't have to interact with the game. Now granted, I guess you're right, if EVE made like an out-of-game chat client that talks with your corp, then great, I would use that in a minute. But until that exists, then there's a certain amount of internal support, because we don't just play EVE together. We also may play Overwatch together, or we may do other things together. So your entire infrastructure cannot just be about EVE.
Well, there's something to be said for having redundancy over CCP servers too. Like, how many times has the game gone down while you're on mobile? You need to coordinate people logging in as soon as possible when EVE comes back up.
Yep.
That's maybe the primary reason things used to crash, and you need to keep communications up. But
here's the thing. I mean, even with EVE Skunk, I don't know, what is it? Is it going someplace else, or what? Or is it just closed down, shut down?
Basically, what happened is one alliance started getting their mails and things leaked onto there,
and it was some nobodies too.
Yeah, it was like Panic or whoever they are. I don't even know who they are. And what they did was, and this is probably the bit that like irks me more than anything, they filed a complaint with the service provider that hosted the website, and it got taken down under the basis it was a harassing website. It was used for harassment. And so what they've actually done is re-upload the whole site onto Tor, or the darknet, or whatever you want to call it. So basically, if you have the link, you can go and visit anyway. It's just not browsable on these search engines, and it's just not controlled in any way, shape, or form by a service provider. So,
I guess where my question really is going is, I've been dealing with third-party forums and things like that for corps and alliances and things like that for so long now. Is EVE Skunk itself is it just a relic of some past era that no longer matters at all anymore?
I almost never used it for any kind of. I mean, for serious intel work, you have your own tools anyway.
Yeah.
It was to EVE Voice what serious intel tools are to EVE Skunk.
Yeah.
But the larger point Marcia makes it, and this is where I was thinking of taking this conversation, was that because people can meet on Slack, and you have the social aspect of EVE, then why do you need to log in? You're having the fulfillment of conversation. You're keeping up with the news. You feel involved. You have all that, and you don't have to actually log in. You could do it at work. You could do it on your way home. So does that keep the numbers suppressed on who's actually inside the client playing it?
Well, and it is an excellent point. And as I responded, it's interesting because when Slack really started to raise in its popularity, which would be the end of last year, beginning of this year, you saw another thing happen too, or it was just after another thing happened, which was that CCP started discussing creating more support for in-game communities, right? And it got rapidly shouted down by a major vocal group of the player base because they called it non-war deckable corporations or something like that, right? And so there was a lot of talk about making like NPSI organizations or other organizations be able to be an entity within the game, but there was a lot of negativity about that. And at the same time, the tools for outside of game coordination became so universal that it is incredibly possible that a lot of the socializers just kind of abandoned it in mass. Although what I find interesting is that a lot of the key socializers, a lot of the people who I consider to be very core members of the EVE community socialization framework, including like Sindel Pellion, rejected Slack completely. So I'm sure that the situation is way more complex than any of us are able to view it from right now, but I think it is an important factor.
Oh, that's cool. All right, we've reached the end of the show. I want to thank everybody for coming, and we got up to 142, it looks like. I don't know if we peaked there, but thank you for showing up. A lot of people, like Marcia, are in Europe, where it is about dawn, I think. The sun is coming up. Thanks for taking your disco naps and staying up with us. I'd like to thank Asher.
4 a.m.
Asher, you have anything to say? We'll give you a little more if you have anything else you want to talk.
No, I think you covered it pretty good. Thanks for having me on the show. It was a lot of fun talking with you guys.
Yeah, thanks. It wasn't all FC issues, but we're going to leave that to your show, which is a phenomenal podcast on FCing. If you want to learn how to fly, or if you want to learn how to behave in a fleet or know what's going on with fleets, I suggest you listen to Asher Elias's podcast called The Asher Hour. It can be found on
he teaches about fleet behavior?
Well, you pick it up. You know, if you listen to how people are supposed to behave, you can kind of disguise yourself among them. I'm going to give Ashterothi one chance to talk about a podcast that he's now creating, which I think is going to be great. So if you can catch that also on CZ. Ash, why don't you tell us about it real quick?
Yeah, so as you said, I kind of talked about it a little bit, but so instead of being just general news, the goal is to pick a specific focus and talk to that about that. And our goal is to have it come out kind of related to the different patches that are coming out, and in order to try to put the game into context for players. Right now, as you mentioned, it is on Crossing Zebras, but we kind of hope to expand outward from there. But yeah, our first episode is really is out. It's just about an hour and 15 minutes. I'm super proud of it. I think it's one of the better pieces that I've gotten to be part of. You know, both Elise and Mike are very smart people and are unwilling to let me run all over them, which is good. I found as a host that the less I talk, the better the podcast is. So I'm very hopeful for the potential of On Grid. So check it out.
That was definitely true today about the show.
Yeah,
Yes.
The less I talk, the better show was for sure. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for showing up. The last thing I want to put out is for the podcast, I'm trying to recover some money to pay for broadcasting. Actually, the broadband, unfortunately, it ended up costing a bunch of money. So for that, I actually put up a Patreon. So it's patreon.com Matterall, and that's my name. You guys all know the name, so I won't spell it out for you. And with that, you know, if you could help raise funds, that would be great. If you can't, we'll try to figure something else on how to do that.
Have you thought about just creating a mailing list and just emailing out the MP3 to whoever wants it?
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
I'm kidding.
I'll take any suggestion, you know. Yeah, so thanks, and we're going to stick around after hours inside the channel, but we're going to give up the live feed right now. And if you could, if you wanted to join us, just whisper me or any of the panelists up here, and they'll give you the TeamSpeak information on which we talk on, and we'll be hanging out backstage for a while. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next time.
Bye.